Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. This will be part 5 of my discussion with Steve Kim. In this episode, we will discuss Anthony Joshua. However, I'm just attaching this section to the segment that you'll then see with Steve, just to provide you guys with some updates and some additional context, because that was filmed over a week ago now on Tuesday, and today is Thursday the 25th of May. So news rolls, news develops, and there is new news to talk about regarding AJ. Now, with regards to AJ's developing story, he was initially due to fight 3 times in 2023. He fought Franklin, then he was going to fight again in the summer, and then in December, this massive fight against Deontay Wilder, which rumours are telling us that he has actually agreed Deontay his portion of the personal terms. So that's great news. But after the Franklin fight, AJ put out an Instagram story which changed the narrative completely, and he said, I'll see you guys in December. And the implication was, and what everybody was led to believe, is that AJ would not be fighting again until December. This led to a whole bunch of criticism that flew at the feet of Matchroom. What is going on here? You know, why isn't Anthony Joshua being more properly prepared? I've always felt he has something akin to post-traumatic stress disorder since that Ruiz fight. Some people feel it was since the Klitschko fight. He's not quite been the same, and we're going to get to that in a moment with some comments Froch has made. And in order to overcome phobias, if he's fearing what's coming back at him, and he's afraid of getting knocked out and what the knock-on effect of that could be mentally, emotionally, and so on and so forth, the way to achieve desensitization is a gradual exposure to something, but consistently doing it. If you're scared of heights, you go up to the first floor, then you go up to the second floor. When you're comfortable with the second floor, you move up to the third floor. Eventually you're on that 10th floor. That's how desensitization works. So AJ needs to be in the ring as often as possible, as active as possible, throwing punches, having punches thrown at him, and as he starts to knock guys out and become more destructive and more consistent, he will almost push to the back of his mind those demons and feel like the guy he used to feel like, in theory. Well, Eddie Hearn today gave an interview with Boxing Social, and he casually dropped in, Anthony Joshua will probably be out again on August the 12th. Now that's changed the narrative again, right? Now Dillian Whyte was calling him a coward, saying he was afraid of fighting him and so on and so forth. There's been public pressure. Steve Kim himself had a back and forth with Eddie Hearn on Twitter about this specific instance too. So maybe the public pressure has made Matchroom and Team AJ say, you know what, we can't just sit this out. Maybe Skills challenged us not to take any risks. Maybe it's the management of AJ that didn't want to take any risks. Give us some opportunities to work with Derek James behind the scenes without pressure. But the fact of the matter is the fans need to see us out there. We need to be showing our faces on the street, so to speak. So let's get into this. It could be that, but it is just a rumor, and he did just say probably in August. So what we're going to deal with is why AJ would not be put out in the summer and what that would mean. What are the knock-on effects of that? In addition to that, Froch gave an interview today with Talk Sport. You can find the video on YouTube. It's called He'll Be Remembered for Losing to the Fat Kid from Mexico. Froch questions AJ's legacy. Now, obviously, you know Carl, and he admits this in the interview. He loves a bit of tongue-in-cheek, and he says certain things to get attention. That fat kid from Mexico can fight, right? But nonetheless, it's a funny one-liner, and he's sort of jokingly mugging off AJ's legacy. And I say jokingly because although he means what he says, I'm sure of that. I know he's very good friends with Robert McCracken. He doesn't feel that Rob was treated fairly, so there's a bit of a spite, shall we say, there. But he makes a few jokes as well, saying, AJ beat Klitschko in front of 80,000 fans. It's not really the number they were talking about, as in 90,000, because I saw a few empty seats at the top. In other words, he didn't want to get outdone, right? So there's a bit of humour there. And that's what's captured most people's attention. But he also says something that goes under the radar. So, not a lot of people are talking about, which I think is significant. He goes on to say that he's asked whether Anthony Joshua is a true fighter, a natural fighter, and he says, listen, he hasn't been doing this since he was a kid like I have been. He came into this quite late. I don't think he's a natural fighter. When he had to go through that hellacious thing that he went through against Vladimir Klitschko, he realized, I don't really want to be doing this anymore, so he started to alter his style and become more of a boxer. And he goes on to say that's an error in some ways, and Robert McCracken told him not to do that. Robert McCracken told him not to box with a boxer of the level of Alexander Usyk, who's one of the best people that have ever breathed to be involved in boxing, is what Froch says. So, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's not word for word, but it's along those sorts of lines. The point is here that McCracken was criticised staunchly for some of the instructions he was given Anthony Joshua while he was in the corner for the first Usyk fight. Brilliant AJ, brilliant when he would be timing sporadically an Usyk entry, for instance, and catching him with a nice left hook or something like that. But it was when he was boxing. When he was boxing and landing something clean, he would be praised for it. And many people felt that that was being reinforced rather than him being told, AJ, get out there and turn this into a fight because you're not going to outbox this guy. And AJ himself was saying how he just takes sort of feedback from the corner. And so he was relying on his corner to guide him, essentially. So he was almost putting the blame at the feet of Robert McCracken. Well, from what Carl Froch is saying today, that's not the case. Now, this could just be Carl being, anti-AJ or really, it's not really anti-AJ. It's more pro-McCracken. But there's an alternative to that, and it could be that it's true. That McCracken did ask him to go out there and have a fight, and AJ wasn't willing to, and he was more comfortable trying to box. He didn't want to push himself. And if that is the case, whether he fights in the summer or not, whether he is working with Derek James or not, is he right mentally? Or is the Anthony Joshua we knew gone? With all that in mind, let's get into this discussion with Steve Kim. But I also want to talk about Anthony Joshua because he's an example of somebody who is a commodity from early in his career. I know you've spoken about this as well in the past, that in his developmental years, he became a twice-a-year fighter, really. And there's talk about him fighting Deontay Wilder in December. Initially, he was saying he wanted to fight in the summer. Now that doesn't seem to be the case. Are we seeing a position here whereby his management or whoever is in charge of making the decisions in his career are considering finances more than the development of the fighter?
Yes. I mean, the agenda, the stated agenda of Anthony Joshua coming into 2023 was all about development, making up for lost time. Let's kind of rebuild this. And he has that 12-round fight against Jermaine Franklin. It wasn't the greatest fight in the world, but he got some key rounds. He started to kind of get back into it. And then instead of saying, okay, in 4 months, we're going to go again, it becomes, well, we're going to go to Deontay Wilder in December. I'm like, well, wait a minute. What happened to the agenda? And see, you turned it once again into like rebuilding the athlete. You went right back to the business. And let's go back with Anthony Joshua. When he first won a title, his management and Matchroom realized Charles Martin is an easy mark. This is not Larry Holmes. So they rolled the dice. They took a calculated gamble and they said, we can beat that guy right now. Knocks him out early. Looked very good. And the worst thing that ever happened to Anthony Joshua as an overall developed fighter was that he became big business so early. I remember about 2-3 years ago, I think it was during one of the Devin Haney fights, Eddie Hearn was in Las Vegas. I had a chance to interview him, and we're talking. I said, Eddie, why doesn't Anthony Joshua fight more? Don't you think you've heard his development? And he just said, well, with the stadium fights and the big-time promotions, and we got to market this thing, we simply don't have the time or the logistics to make that work. So you had to sacrifice one for the other. But even a guy like me, I cannot deny, financially, it's been a grand slam. So how can you argue with it? But again, maybe I would also argue, well, if he would have actually won some of those fights that he's lost, if he was a better developed fighter, maybe he'd make more money on the back end. I mean, you can look at it both ways, but it does feel like to me that going straight into a Deontay Wilder fight without fighting again in the summer, Chris, doesn't that kind of feel like a cash out or a roll of the dice?
I was just going to ask you that because here's the thing. They've made certain decisions in the early part of his career, but now he's reached a point whereby a lot of people feel that he has some sort of something that is akin to post-traumatic stress disorder in some way, because there was so much hype around him, there was so much pressure. He tasted that defeat to Andy Ruiz, which was traumatic, and many people don't feel as though he's been the same mentally. Well, if you were to actually engage with a psychologist about how to overcome a phobia or these sorts of traumatic experiences, you have to face your fears and consistently do it. So if Anthony Joshua gets back in the ring again and again and again, and he's winning and he starts to look more destructive, eventually you overcome that hurdle. By taking that away from him and then throwing him in December against Wilder, is it a way of saying, actually, we don't believe you're ever going to be the guy you used to be? So strike while the iron's hot financially, but we're not that confident in your abilities to actually do what it is that you've been saying you want to do.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I feel, because you went from saying we might fight 4 times in 2023 to just like, you know what? We're going to fight 9 months apart against the guy that many people think is going to spark us out. You actually look at Anthony Joshua's changing mentality in the ring. I think it goes all the way back to the Klitschko fight. I have a term. The first time a fighter really gets hurt, buzzed, knocked down, I call it getting Rosario'd, and that goes back all the way to the Hector Camacho fight against Edwin Rosario in the summer of 1986. Hector Camacho was one of the most exciting, electric fighters you'll ever see. He got hit twice, and he said after the fight, this Macho thing is no fun, and he became the boringest running stinker I ever saw because it changed the guy, and he kind of admitted it. And I've seen it with other fighters, and when you get Rosario'd, you're never quite the same. The Ruiz fight is the most obvious, but I'm just telling you, I think there was a change in Anthony Joshua after the Klitschko fight back in 2017.